Frankenstein Photoshop. I take many photographs with my phone, and their bodies are one photograph. Her head is a separate photo. His head is a separate photo. So this is a composite of three, and here are their heads enlarged. I'm not going to be working on that part right now. And here is my iPad photo of the setting, and I'm barely using that as reference. All right, so there's several things. Let me take just a second and zoom you in on their faces just for a second. Well, that's not very zoomed in, is it? Hang on, let me see if I can pick you up like this. You're getting at a terrible angle, but that gives you some idea. And basically, last week, after I returned from Ohio in the wedding, I spent one session, I would say one day, but that doesn't mean all day. No. That means 2, 3, or 4 hours on Chris, and then another day. And part of the reason for pausing is so that all this can dry, right? And those of you who think that oil paints take forever to dry, well, let me take just a second. 2 secret weapons. For me, number one, any fast dry medium will do, but this is my favorite one. It's called Liquin. It's a gel. That bottle's nearly empty. My other secret weapon is that my titanium white paint for the last 10 or 15 years has always been an alkyd white. So my paintings are nearly always dry to the touch the next day. So one day here, and then one day so far on the whole background. So at the moment, Alexa and Chris, their faces are ahead of the rest of the painting. My guess is they're probably about 90% accurate, but the last 10% will really make a difference. And again, here is their photograph. They are both elongated. I could say they're both sargentized, John Singer sargentized. I could say they're both made into semi-heroic proportions. Chris was actually quite tall, so he did not need to be stretched out any. Alexa, on the other hand, was quite short. She was beautiful. Vietnamese, I think it's my first Vietnamese bride, and she really was just stunning. But I've lengthened her. Again, if my client looks at the painting and says, "Ooh, he made me thin," or "he made me tall," then I have failed. I've overdone it. If, on the other hand, which I think will be the case, they'll look at the painting and go, "Ooh, we look good. That's what I want." So it's a real delicate balance, how much to stretch people. This is one of the things that I'll toot my own horn for just a second, that a professional wedding painter will do that some won't do, because they're using a tracing program to transfer their photograph onto the canvas. And until those applications, it'll just be a matter of time, until those applications allow you to elongate the figures, I certainly would not consider using them. So anyway, but at the moment, as you can tell, Alexa and Chris are far closer to being finished than everything else. So in this session, I'm going to be working on everything else. And there's so many things that need to be done, I don't even know where to start. So I'm just going to start with one. There is a drawing issue. This is a little embarrassing because I would like to think that, when I'm there at the reception, that I pull everything off with aplomb. And there's another word for that. What is it? It'll come to me. It's a French word. It's a word that, believe it or not, the word I'm looking for refers to the behavior of courtesans in the court in the presence of the king. They were supposed to behave with a certain degree of, oh, it is nothing. And all the people who served the king, the only reason I bring it up because it's a funny word, but that well expresses the way I try to paint, especially when I'm at a reception. So it's embarrassing to come home and go, whoops. So my drawing problem was here. I had a man and a woman here, and they were way too small compared to, so I've enlarged them now. While I'm doing, so I have dark paint on my brushes. And those of you who are regulars following, you know very, very well that we, artists, I'll say, who have a deeper understanding of the process of painting, we get dark with transparent paint and light with opaque paint. So I'm getting darker right now. Therefore, the paint, the paint that is on my brushes is of course transparent. And all of these people, as in most of my wedding paintings, all of these people are completely made up, fictitious, if you want, invented. Although I do have a photograph of to the parents. They're going to go here. Chris's parents, who are paying for the painting, so they're going to go there. Alexa's parents, I may have a photograph, I'm not sure. Anyway, so I'm doing some real fundamental changes right at the moment. All right, now, while I've got darkness on my brush, oh, I'm sorry, I'll switch this to a shot of my palette when I'm mixing paint. So let me see if there's anything else that needs to be dark. Yeah, a little detail, a little correction. This is so far in the corner. It doesn't really need to be correct. Certainly not perfect, but I feel like it was just a little bit too off. So I'll correct that. Oh, I know what thing I want to do. Again, okay. I'm looking at the photo, which turns out it doesn't help me. So as you can see, this was a country club, beautiful. I was very happy when I walked in. Well, actually, I pulled it up online before I showed up there in Columbus, Ohio. And I was very pleased to see a wall full of windows. So, and the reception took place at about, in the first dance, 6:30 or 7 or so. And in that particular time zone, the sun outside, again, here's the photograph, the sun outside was quite light. So that's always good news, because every wedding, well, this may not be true, but every wedding reception I've ever painted is essentially, it's entirely brown, yellow, and orange. Everything is warm. It's candlelight, warm, 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 because people look good in warm light. Food looks good in warm light. It's a romantic light. You all know that. So a wedding reception is always warm. Therefore, you, as if you're a wedding painter, y'all are wedding painters, right? Some of you might be. You need to look for an excuse to introduce cool color. And of course, I didn't look for an excuse here because it was actually right there in front of me. But if a painting is all entirely warm, brown, yellow, orange, it loses impact. You want some cool colors, and this goes for any kind of painting, not just wedding paintings, of course. You want some cool colors to contrast with the warm. So I had plenty of cool here. Now, one of the things I'm struggling with, here's the rule. Every rule can be broken, but if you don't know the rule, you're just screwing up. Every painting and photograph, both, should have a primary light source and a secondary light source. And if the two are competing with each other, it's uncomfortable for the viewer. So I have a real challenge going on in my painting right now, because it's a little bit hard to tell. Is the primary light source the blue light coming through the windows, or is it the warm light from chandeliers and everything else shining in the room? And primary and secondary. And I really need to make up my mind. And I'm having a hard time, as you can hear, I'm having a hard time making up my mind. While I'm thinking, I'm going to darken a little bit. Also, this room, as you can see, had these great big beams, which is nice. Architectural elements are key for creating an attractive wedding painting. And sometimes those elements are literally not there. And then as a painter, as a wedding painter, I have quite a challenge, because I have to figure out some way to create architecture elements, in quotes now, quote unquote architecture elements that aren't literally there. But that was not the problem here. There was plenty of architecture. Getting these lines correct, by the way, let me give you a little bit more insight. I did the best I could when I was there. I was using my long-handled brushes like this and lining them up with the photograph or lining them up with the scene in front of me and so on. But when I got home, I was not happy. There was some offness. So I actually took this, I should have videotaped this part, but I didn't. Took my painting, laid it down on a big dining room table, and took an 8-foot long ruler, no kidding, straight edge, and found my vanishing point, like 5 feet that way, and literally redrew all the perspective. So it's, those lines are technically perfect now. They all converge at one spot. So I'm happy that that's over with. Again, I just want to, since I have warm paint mixed up in my brushes, I want to finish using it here and there. Okay. Silence. Dead silence. You know, I am going to proceed, and it's conceivable I could even change my mind on this later on, but I'm going to, at least for the moment, make an executive decision. It might be wrong, and I might undo it in the next couple of days, but I'm going to declare the windows are the primary light source. Everything else is secondary. So, in the interest of that decision, this is going to be a chandelier, and it will look like a chandelier when I'm finished. But I'm going to push the whole thing back a little bit, and while I'm pushing stuff back, I'm going to go ahead also, that's a little bit too bright, I'm mixing here oxide red and raw umber. Raw umber is my go-to color killer color paint. It's the color of paint I use to kill colors, is raw umber, because it's very neutral-ish, slightly warm, not too warm. So let me keep doing a little bit more of that in oxide red and raw umber. So in a sense, I'm answering my question. We're going to find out, of course, if I change my mind in the next hour, I can pick up a rag, dip it in Gamsol or some brush cleaner, and wipe all this off, of course. But what I'm doing then, right now, essentially is dimming the lights in the room. And then the next thing I'm going to do is brighten the light coming through the window. And after I've done that, I'll have a good idea whether this was a good idea. Again, dimming that chandelier. I'm going to go to a bigger brush now. I use these, I love these, I call them cheap chip brushes. They're called chip brushes. And they're cheap. So, and I've got, again, I put out a little more liquid. It's not normally that loud of an operation, but I'm nearly out, so pardon the banging. And here's my oxide red. I just about need more of that. And here's my raw umber. And for what it's worth, it's a student grade cheap raw umber because I like that, because I use it almost entirely as a color killer. I don't want to have to be terribly precise. When I'm putting it onto my brush. Okay, that's not dark enough. Let's bring a little dioxazine violet. Actually, that's not dioxazine, it's something else. I'm going to add some ultramarine. All of a sudden now this corner was already dark, but now that I'm darkening the lights in the whole room, I want that corner even darker. And this one. This you're seeing right now, by the way, why it is, in my opinion, desperately important that you understand this concept of you get dark with transparent colors. Let me take a minute to walk through that, because even though I've talked about it 100 times in my videos, it's been several years since I was doing hundreds of videos. Here's the way a student beginner thinks. Forgive me while I make fun, so to speak, of a early journey painter. They think, well, I want this corner darker. You with me? But I don't want it black, for goodness sake. So I will add some white to my darkness. Of course, by adding white, you're making it opaque. Are you with me? I'm assuming everybody's understanding that. I don't need to explain that too much more. White paint and or yellow ochre and a handful of other colors are primarily responsible for making the paint on your brush opaque. Do not be confused with the tube of paint that says opaque or transparent or whatever. That is true. That's another subject entirely, because you can take any color in the world and add enough medium to it and it's translucent at least, if not transparent. So don't be confused. Oh, well, I only buy opaque paints, or I only buy transparent paint. No, that is not the subject at hand. That is not the subject at hand. I'm talking about how much medium you add. And some people, now, of course, some people don't, and some good painters don't use mediums at all, which, in other words, they paint very opaque. They paint straight out of the tube, as is their prerogative, of course. I just think they're wrong. Why? Because transparent and translucent colors are far more interesting. They're richer, they're more complex. The eye enjoys complexity. The eye enjoys seeing stuff. So the more stuff you can give an eye to see, the happier eyes are. Not to be confused with too much detail or overworking it. So I hope anybody looking at my paintings would not be so silly as to think I'm into too much detail. That's clearly not what's going on here. All right, so transparent color to get dark. Once again, I want to dim all. Making a lot of noise, aren't I? We call this aeroba painting. Painting so fast and hard that you get an aerobic workout. That would be a good target for some of you. Paint with energy. Don't paint like a sissy. I've commenced meddling now. Okay, let me stand back and look at that from a distance. Okay, good. It is definitely darker. That's progress. I'm going to go back to this smaller chip brush now. 2 smaller chip brushes. And this time pick up oxide red and a little Indian yellow. And just again to darken all the light that's in the room, including even the front. This is the bride and groom's table with flowers over it. You know, if you can make out what's going on here. Chris and Alexa won't have any trouble understanding what's going on because they were there. So they say, oh yeah, there's our table, they will say. And of course, I don't want to draw a lot of attention to that table. That's just part of the backdrop. Now, how much do I want to darken this? Generally speaking, and you can certainly already see this at work in the painting, generally speaking, the highest highlight of the painting will be Alexa's dress, the whitest white, I'm saying, their faces, and the glow right around them. So you can already see I've applied a couple days ago a lot of bright light value blue right behind Alexa's head. And I will actually probably increase that a little bit. All right, let's change gears considerably and switch to, give me just a second, I'll let you watch me do this. Watch me so I'm going to go to my palette. Sorry, for some reason it's lagging way behind. Well, let me keep talking. So I'm working on my palette. I'm scraping. I use a glass palette with a backing board and metal edging around to hold it all together. All right, it's not going there, so I'll go back to my regular view. So I'm going to mix up now. Let me see if I can get it go to my palette. Okay, there we go. Finally, it's showing my palette. And I'm mixing up titanium white, of course, which is a alkyd white, which means it's a fast, dry white. And at the moment, I have pure phthalo blue. And I don't know if that's the right value or not. I won't know until I apply some to the painting. I'm wanting to brighten now the blue light coming through the windows. So now I'm getting lighter. So tell me, class, the paint I'm using, is it transparent or is it opaque? Absolutely opaque, correct. Now, I am applying it in a light, scumbling kind of manner, so it's actually translucent. It's actually not opaque. I am applying a little bit too much energy there in those strokes. I'm going to darken my paint down a little bit and smooth out some of this. I don't want quite that much attention drawn. And again, the brightest, lightest whitest part of the windows is going to be right around the bride and groom, especially around Alexa's head. So this will be the brightest spot here, second brightest behind Chris's head. So that's what I'm working on right now. And if it's bright light coming over Chris's shoulders, then that brightness will bleed into his black tux, right? I have a hunch that I haven't finished painting his tux yet. So that means I'll be painting it again, but if I do, I'll be sure to come back and add blue glow spilling out into his black tux. Same thing, you can see that I'm allowing my brushes to fly up into the dark area. If it's too much, one finger will do the job. All right, let me come over here now and again brighten the white behind the bride's head. While I'm working in this close, let me take a minute and zoom in just a little bit so you guys can see. Oh, that's not very much. Sorry about that. I'll change that setting later when I take a break so I can zoom in further than that. But it'll have to do for now. All right, so I'm painting light right now. That's a real key concept. The more brightness, the more brightness I want to convey, then the softer the edges must become. So as you can see here, the mullions, those are the boards in a window, those are called mullions. The mullions have just about disappeared in part of this. Why? Because the bright light white it's not white, it's blue, but you know what I mean. The bright light is diffusing around. Glow. So there's a lot of pale blue bleeding into her hair. And if it's too much, a little finger fixes it quite easily. Certainly bleeding into the tan, brown, yellow colored wall behind her. And there was a flower arrangement over their table, which is some of the white, those are flowers that you see there. Let me stand back and now take a judge. See if I like the way this is going. I think I do. So in essence, what I've just done with all the work I've done since this broadcast started, I've darkened everything and lightened the painting right here. And I believe it's working. I'll proceed. I have about an hour or hour and a half to change my mind. Because again, I could take a rag, not a paper towel, because they shed, a rag and dip it in Gamsol, which is what I'm using as a solvent, and I could wipe everything I've done in the last 30 minutes because everything underneath is dry, is impervious. That will not be wiped off, but I could easily wipe off everything I've done during this broadcast. But I don't think I'm going to do that because so far my judgment says, yes, this was a correct decision. Now, I'm going to keep these brushes with the blue paint on them because I may come back and do more of that. But I want to switch to, and now I want to lighten up. Just a little while ago, I actually darkened this. Do you remember with transparent? Yes, yes. That was a correct impulse. Oh boy. Okay, here, let me, I'm biting off a bigger subject than I had intended, but let's go here. One of the rules of painting. Now, you will, detour, I interrupt myself constantly. You will hear some art professors say, "Ah, there are no rules of painting." Two things I will say about that. Either that art professor does not know how to paint, which there are many of those. Phew, let's not go down that road. But what is actually more likely is not that they don't know how to paint, but they may not be gifted at philosophy or language. Because they will say, "Oh, there's no such thing as laws of painting." And then they actually do paint according to many guidelines. They just don't call them laws. Anyway, but I embrace the notion of one of the books I've been writing for 10 years. With God's help, it'll be published someday. It's called it was called The Mostly Immutable Laws of Painting. But then I found out not enough people knew what immutable was, so the joke was lost on them. It's either immutable or not. It cannot be mostly immutable. All right. So I've called it the breakable laws of painting. So the laws are serious and important, but every law can be broken because very often there's a contravening principle or law. There's another law that takes, and the key is knowing which rule, which guideline gets priority with every stroke that you put on your canvas. Now that might be too bright. Let me back up and look at that. Yeah, that's a little bit too bright. All right, so how does one fix that? Easy peasy. Pick up a rag, put my finger in it, no Gamsol, just a dry rag. And I'm going to brush this back. Again, their faces are dry, so I'm not in danger of ruining some earlier good painting by doing this. Ooh, that's much better. That's much better. All right, now I want to try to match that value in the subsequent paint that I put on the canvas. So I'm mixing a little bit darker now. Nope, still too bright. The student grade raw umber is also excellent for just darkening a value. If you have a color paint and it's the right color, it's just too bright, one thing you can do is just add some raw umber to it. All right, that looks about right. Let's see. So this is a trick. Oh, I've started to tell you about one of the laws and then interrupted myself. All right, here it is. Let me back up. I got distracted talking about whether there are laws or not and then didn't finish my thought. All right, one of the laws of painting is, and this is universal, this is not Dan Nelsonism, this is a art professorism. That is to say, this is pretty well acknowledged principle of painting, and it is darks first, lights last. Dark first, light last. Dark first, light last. And that applies on the macro level and on the micro level. So I'm employing that principle right now. A few minutes ago, you saw me when I was doing glazing up here. I actually darkened this area in here, partly so that I would have headroom, so to speak, to follow the rule, which is increase the light between the two faces. Everything I'm doing here with the bright yellow, I mean, that's blue, the bright blue and the bright brown here is very, very, very common, standard for me. Standard wedding painting. If you go to weddingpainter.com, just click on, I have like 4 different pages. I have over 100 wedding paintings there on my website, weddingpainter.com, and you will see that creating this glow right around the bride and groom is standard operating procedure for me. Now, I'm squinting at this. I'll take my glasses off so I don't have to squint. I'm gonna finish this broadcast very shortly. I'm thinking I will wipe this, not clean the brushes, but just get the excess paint off them. Pick up some more titanium white because I'm going to brighten this color a little bit. Because at the moment, this area in here is all the same color. And I think, I'm not sure, but I think I can get a little more drama if I do, again, a little bit more of a glow right around. Ooh, yeah, definitely. I don't know if you guys can even see that, but there's a little, it's slightly lighter. I just did that just now. I'm going to do the same thing to the groom's face, to Chris's face. Chris and Alexa is who we have here. Now, I am not, let me make sure you understand. I think I'm about 90% done with both of their faces. But that last 10% is really important. I've not done that yet. First of all, I'm going to triple, quadruple check to make sure that they're accurate to the photograph. That's part of the last 10%. But then also I'm going to put light highlights on their faces. For instance, in the photograph, Chris literally has a sharp white, almost pure white highlight on his forehead, on the bridge of his nose, on his cheek. And Alexa likewise has almost a perfectly white highlight on the front of her top lip. So things like that, because some of that is being obscured right now by the sloppy painting that I'm doing. Sloppy is a relative term, you understand. When I do their faces, I won't be using brushes this big, right? I'll be using super fine red sable brushes. All right, I think that's enough for now. While I'm lightening stuff, though, the frames around these windows are actually creating a bit of a challenge for me because they're lighter than the surrounding standard, the way that is in your house probably. The mullions and the frames around the window are almost white, off-white, and the walls are beige, tan, light brown, right? So I do want to reflect that reality to some extent, although it's not critical. So right at the moment I am lightening. And the reason it's a challenge is because the light is coming through the windows, from the windows. So these mullions in reality would be quite hang on. I can't always think of words and paint at the same time. Would be quite silhouetted. They would appear dark. In fact, they do appear dark in this photograph. But that's one of the advantages of painting over photography, is us painters have the ability to paint in such a way that matches the impression or the emotional, the feeling that a viewer has about the room, even though the photograph. So I am not copying the photograph right here. I'm actually violating the photograph ever so slightly, so as to give the correct impression as to how the room looked. What did the room actually look like? All right, this broadcast has gone on plenty long enough, probably too long. If I was a real man, I would edit it, smooth it out, add music, but don't hold your breath. Probably not going to happen. All right, thanks for watching. I hope to be broadcasting again very soon. Bye-bye.